COVID has hit West Ham hard. It's hit all clubs pretty hard. Whatever West Ham get on a match day is about 1.5 million. Spurs have already got half of that from pie sales and beer sales. As an outsider looking at West Ham where they are in the table, there seems to be progress taking place. If you get into the top four, a lot of that debt can be paid off because Champions League money is crazy. At the start of the decade, West Ham owed £11 million in instalments for transfer fees, and we're now sitting in the position where they owe 111. So from a cash flow point of view, I think the club will be fine. Is it sustainable on a longer term basis? No, it's not. West Ham were paying £134 in total for wages and transfer fees for every £100 that was coming through the door. The club already owe £111 million. So you're starting off with that as a minus figure in terms of your transfer budget in many regards.
West Ham United Football Club announced huge losses this week in the latest set of annual accounts for the year up to May 2020. Shortly after the start of the coronavirus pandemic and the beginning of the first national lockdown. And on this special one-off show, we're going to break down the results, hopefully in language that everyone will be able to understand, whether you're well-versed in football finances or otherwise. We hope this show will explain exactly what the ramifications are for the club and its fans following the release of the latest financial figures, while attempting to bring you the details and finer points. Joining me on this special show are three experts in the world of football finance, two of whom are particularly well-versed on the situation at West Ham, being as they are dyed-in-the-wool season ticket-toting hammers. Firstly, I'd like to introduce my co-host for the evening, Eamon, who is otherwise known as the Pink Palermo. How are you doing, Eamon?
Evening all, yeah, and expert is a stretch, Graham, okay? Being able to use your own cash point machine does not qualify you as a finance expert.
Okay. I was trying to big you up there. Look, I know we're in exotic company here, but also joining us on this show tonight, we have Mark, who is known more commonly on the KUMB.com forum as Wembley 1966. He is the KUMB forum, definitely a financial expert as far as football finances are concerned anyway. And the go-to man on the forum. How you doing, Mark? Good to see you.
I'm doing well. I wouldn't call myself an expert. I'd rather say an interest in football finance. Perhaps a nerdy one.
Well, two very modest gentlemen so far anyway. What about the last one is most definitely, I can say this, guarantee this, he is a football finance expert. He appears on TV, in the media, all over the shop discussing football finances, and we are absolutely delighted to have him back on KUMB TV once again. Welcome to Kieran Maguire, otherwise known as the Price of Football. How are you doing, Kieran?
I'm sound, lads. Thanks very much for the invite. I'm very impressed with Eamon because I can't remember what a cash point machine looks like. It's been so long since I've been out of the house.
Yes, it has been a long time. And of course, we're going to come to that throughout the discussion.
White £5 notes. So there you go.
We're going to start tonight by bringing you the key points of the accounts. Some of the main figures that will have struck you when the details were announced yesterday. Firstly, the club announced a £65 million loss, up from £27.2 million last year. The wages to turnover ratio up to 93%, which was a huge increase on last year's figure of 71.2%. The CEO, Karen Brady, David Moyes, and the Chief Financial Officer, Andy Mollett, have all taken a deferred salary, 30% deferred. We don't know until when, I don't think, at this stage. And the turnover, the club's turnover, the main figure, of course, is down from 190.7 million last year to just 139.5 million this year. That comprises of match day revenue, broadcasting and media rights, and commercial revenue. Those main figures going in to make the total of £139.5 million. So we'll start the show by going to Keiran and asking you, Keiran, why this year has the club made such a substantial loss, and how much of an impact has COVID, the coronavirus crisis, had?
COVID has hit West Ham hard. It's hit all clubs pretty hard. If you take a look at there's 9 clubs in the Premier League who have published their financial results to date for 2020. Between them, they've lost around about 600 million quid. And we're talking some big hitters there. We're talking Everton, Chelsea, Arsenal, West Ham, Manchester United, and so on, as well as even the smaller clubs, the ones like Southampton and Brighton. They've been losing 60, 70 million quid in a year. So football's found it tough. The fact that the season was curtailed in March, and remember, we didn't have any football. Second half of March, April, May, all of those matches got shifted to later in the year, and therefore all of the TV revenue from those matches has been excluded from those accounts, and that hit West Ham hard. Probably cost the club around about 40 million quid. So, of that loss that we've spoken, 2/3 of it definitely has come from the loss of TV money. Then you've got those home matches not taking place, at the London Stadium. That's costing the club £1.5 million a pop. So you add four or five of those together, that's another 6 or 7 million, and that broadly is your difference compared to the previous season.
Okay, Mark, were you surprised to see these figures when they were released? The level of the losses?
No, I think they're exactly as expected. I think also there'd been a hint in January that there wasn't money for player acquisition, and there were going to be the losses. I think it was known about the TV revenue. There's also the rebate that will kick in as well over the next couple of years. That's going to be £6-7 million. One interesting thing about trying to compare with other clubs in this year's accounts is some of the clubs have their financial year. Most clubs have them at the end of the season, and so you under normal terms you're comparing like with like. But this year, with the matches delayed and not being able to actually book the broadcasting revenue and the match day revenue until next year, because they occurred after our financial year end at the end of May. But you get anomalies where some clubs, such as Crystal Palace, have a financial year end of June. So they were actually able to book the two matches they played in June in their annual accounts. And that's one of the reasons, well, it is the reason why now Crystal Palace appear above us in revenue terms in the Deloitte Money League. Because they've had those two extra, or two. We play 38 matches a year, so 2/38, a 19th extra income. Sheffield United were only about 6 million below us in the Deloitte League. Well, they cheated even further because their normal financial year end of June was pushed through to the end of July, so they could book all of the 9 matches revenue in there. So we're not actually quite comparing like with like, but what we have the benefit of is that revenue will appear in this year's accounts. So we'll be in a much better position this year. So that 40 million of deferred broadcasting revenue there will come back. Now, we're not going to get the match day income, and we're not going to get the season ticket income. So that those are real losses that will hurt the club. But
I think we'll come back.
No, they were expected, I think, and especially as Kieran mentioned, it's tough for everyone.
Yeah, just touching on the Deloitte list, which was published at the end of January, wasn't it? West Ham, I think, falling to the lowest position in the list since we left Upton Park. As you said, below, surprisingly, I think everybody felt to fall below Crystal Palace, but I guess that's a really good explanation of exactly why that was the case. West Ham, I think, 10th, weren't they, in the list? Behind also Everton and Leicester, I think we slipped below as well this year. But good stuff. Eamon, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, my view of the losses, yes, you're bound to see them. You've got your business, and effectively, at a moment's notice, you close down, and therefore your revenue streams are cut off, but your costs continue to pile up. So clubs would, of course, make those losses. I think in a perverse way, the relatively small amount of match day income we get at West Ham compared with, say, an Arsenal or a Tottenham or a Manchester United might actually help us, because the real damage that's being done here is that loss of match day income, because that's gone forever. We're never seeing that again in West Ham United Football Club or any of the others. They'll try and recoup it through ticket price increases and things like that, I'm sure, in due course. The TV money, shifts from one accounting period into another. There was an element of a rebate that had to be paid back to the TV companies because the season wasn't completed on time. But I suspect clubs like Tottenham in particular, with their brand new stadium and so forth, which was going to be heavily dependent on matchday income, the pandemic must have been pulverizing for their financial results. For us, I think it was being difficult but manageable. So, you wouldn't want to repeat it every year, but I think we're just about weathered the storm. I think there's probably other factors at West Ham that's made our numbers particularly bad. I think the transfer splurge we had under Manuel Pellegrini, I think probably was a slightly larger contributing factor. And I think that's probably what David Sullivan has been tidying up over the last 6 to 9 months, rather than the COVID issue.
Good stuff. Good stuff. On that point, you mentioned Tottenham there. Eamon, I'll put this one to Kieran actually, because we did ask on the KUMB.com forum if anyone had any questions they'd like us to put to you, Kieran. And someone did ask about Tottenham. What they want to know, that Stu one it was, who asks, he'd love to understand why our matchday revenue is so low in comparison to Tottenham, given the fact that both clubs have got a similar capacity. He says, I appreciate they have more games due to the Champions League, so we might have cheaper tickets, but their revenue seems to be 4 times West Ham's, commercial revenue being about 6 times greater. How do you explain that in sort of simple terms?
Well, I mean, you're much closer to this than I am, guys, but the relative cost of a season ticket at West Ham is a lot cheaper than at Spurs. Spurs have got 14 different pricing points for their season tickets, and they go very, very high indeed. You're not going to get one for less than £1,000, or fairly close to £1,000. You throw into that, you've got at least 3 Champions League games. You throw into that they're keeping all of the matchday income from hospitality, sorry, from selling food and drink. Spurs make £800,000 a match from catering. Now, if you think that West Ham make around about £1.5 million a match, full stop, then that's ticket sales, catering, everything. Whatever West Ham get on a match day is about 1.5 million. Spurs have already got half of that from pie sales and beer sales. So that new stadium, I don't know whether you've been there. I went there once, and it is completely geared towards taking your wallet and making sure that there's nothing in it by the end of the day. That's what they're good at. They've got the ground. Their stadium was built with hospitality, with boxes in mind, whereas the London Stadium, it wasn't, as we all know, it wasn't originally a football stadium. It's something which has been changed to become to try to accommodate a football audience, and that's where West Ham lose out. At present, West Ham don't have that same global appeal. It's still an East End club. It's still a local club, and therefore it charges prices more geared towards a working class fan base. If you go to Spurs, it's a completely different fan base. You go to that stadium on a match day, and you see the number of South Korean tourists who are all piling into the mega store, and they're all coming out with their Son shirts and other merchandise, and that's what Spurs have been focusing on. In 2 years, they've gone from having about £6 or £7 million a year more than West Ham in terms of ticket sales, when they were at the old White Hart Lane, to potentially this year that they've generated more than Manchester United.
Wow.
Yeah. See,
Wow.
you'd see 10 years ago, or in 2010, when our owners came along, we were just about 16 million behind in commercial revenue behind Spurs.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now we're about 130 million behind. That gap has widened so much. But Kieran talked about, for instance, the catering revenue. I think we get virtually nothing out of that. So so Spurs is booking the gross revenue that gets taken over the counters.
Yeah.
At the London Stadium, it's managed and outsourced to Delaware North, and then any profit that they make, they take a cut, and then the rest goes to E20 as their, as the fee for either on royalties or as a percentage share of the profit there. So then you're just down to the profit, and then West Ham only get their 30% of any profit that E20 make in excess of $500,000. So right there we're getting peanuts. So you're not comparing quite like with like on the revenue. So that we don't get anything. But the reverse is we pay nothing for stewarding and nothing for police and nothing. Okay, we pay it in the rent, but the rent is so favourable to us that it costs less than the actual cost that are incurred by E20. So we do have a very good rental agreement there that actually goes right down to the bottom line, i.e. our profit, and has an impact on that.
Okay, so not quite the deal of the century as it was perhaps once painted, but
No.
I do agree with Kieran with one thing at least. There, you said that it's a completely different fan base at Tottenham, and I certainly agree with you there. It definitely is a completely different set of fans. Eamon, over to you for the next question.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that every football supporter these days gets concerned with is debt and football clubs being in debt, and we think we're skint as a Premier League club. I mean, God help us, we could be supporting Rochdale or a proper football club in that sense, where they don't get the benefit of all the TV money. But under the current ownership, we all recall the initial press conference they gave where David Sullivan and David Gold spoke about the club being in £110 million of debt, and were they not supporters, they would never have bought the club. And here we are a decade later, and I think we've just declared a net debt of something like £104 million. So in true C6 Stevie style, we started out with nothing and we've still got most of it left. Should we be concerned with that level of debt, Kieran?
In my opinion, no. Debt is only an issue if you can't service it. We've got Spurs owing over £800 million these days. Manchester United have got £500 million. In terms of debt, you're looking at the amount of interest that clubs are paying now. West Ham are paying around about £5 million a year in interest. Now that's likely to go up a wee bit because they've got this new arrangement with MSD Holdings, who appear to have come into the football market, and they've taken over the money that was owed to Barclays and the money that was owed to Rights and Media Funding. So the interest charge will go up a bit, but I wouldn't be too concerned about it because in terms of repayments, there doesn't appear to be a hurry from the lenders. Certainly, David Gold and David Sullivan, they've got 45 million of that debt of theirs. They appear to be in for the long term, as long as they're at the club. We've had some other borrowings from shareholders, debt holders who are not charging any interest as well, which I thought was intriguing a couple of years ago. And that money has gone into the player pot. So there has been an investment. If we take a look at the last 4 seasons, 81 million in 2017, 61 in 2018, 108 in each of the last 2 years. So money has been spent. You are far better qualified than I am to say how successful that money has been spent. But as an outsider looking at West Ham where they are in the table, there seems to be progress taking place in terms of things on the pitch, and they're starting to get a return on that investment because you get an extra £2 million for every additional place you go up in terms of the Premier League. So if you finish 5th instead of 9th, it's 9 million. If you finish, if you get into the top 4, a lot of that debt can be paid off because Champions League money is crazy.
Okay, and on that front, therefore, you touched on the shareholders' loans, essentially, Sullivan and Gold. Where are we, relative to other clubs in terms of what I call football debt, so what we owe to other clubs for those players? So we've spent, signing the player is easy, paying the bill, and we've seen in this year's accounts that they've said that Sebastian Haller we're not going to pay Eintracht Frankfurt now until September 2022. So this is a player that we bought, have since sold, and we won't finish paying for another 18 months. I mean, this is voodoo economics, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think you touched on a point there. If we take a look at the transfer payables, the amount that West Ham and other clubs own, at the start of the decade, West Ham owed £11 million in instalments for transfer fees, and we're now sitting in a position where they owe 111. So, certainly money has been spent. It hasn't been spent necessarily in the form of cash. A lot of the player purchases have been funded on credit, and that's okay, provided the club's delivering on the pitch, and you are getting the extra money coming in. You do reach a point. It's a bit like spending money on a credit card. If you go and spend more and more each month, you reach a point where somebody turns around to you and says, "I think that's enough now," and it starts to drop. Again, who are we going to be benchmarking West Ham against? You look at some of the other clubs in the Premier League, and they're also in for six figures. It is a bit of a cause for concern, but I don't think it's a significant one.
That 111 million we currently owe other clubs is double what it was 2 years ago. So I think we need to look, well, what happened 2 years ago that's got us in this situation? And I think the Pellegrini era is, I think, financially set us back probably 18 months in terms of what's happened. Things. And so, in that 2 years, we've gone from, owing other clubs 57 million to owing them now 111. That's a big chunk of change, and down to, our investment in players has not been wise, it's not been fruitful, and it's certainly not been profitable.
I have to say, it's one of the amazing things about the football industry that clubs will borrow money from someone like MSD Holdings at whatever percentage, 7, 8, 9%, and then offer interest-free loans to other clubs in the form of extended payment terms. I find it quite astonishing that if in any normal business, you simply wouldn't do that. You wouldn't be offering extended credit terms to your customers or suppliers and what have you if you're having to borrow money to fund your business. I just find it quite bizarre.
It is and it isn't. If you actually talk to some chief executives, some finance directors, what they will say is, if I'm buying a player, I'll either be offered £20 million cash now, or if you want to pay him over 3 years, it's going to cost you 3 installments of 8. So it is actually built into what the buying and the selling club are able to negotiate. So there is an interest received and an interest payable cost built into these long-term financing arrangements that we are commonly seeing in terms of clubs. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Eamon, that there are some deals which don't operate like that. I think more and more clubs are cottoning on that if you want good installments. I know I saw a deal when Newcastle sold a player to another club in London for a supposedly £30 million, but it turned out that it's being over 6 years at £5 million a year, and the true cost was actually far less than that.
Okay, good stuff. Yeah. Eamon, did you want to add something?
No. There was a famous case, wasn't there, when I think Leeds United got themselves into a spot of bother some years ago, and I think it was Blackburn Rovers. The two club chairmen had a phone call, and one phoned the other and said, "You can have any player you want, but it has to be £7 million in cash today." And you just think, what other industry operates like that? Used car sales, maybe? I don't know.
I want to ask the guys about something that crops up quite commonly. We're talking about the wage to turnover ratio. Now, Kieran, when we spoke last year, the figure I think was 71%, something like that for West Ham. And I think it's fairly commonly accepted that 70% is an acceptable threshold. for that figure. We've seen that rise to 93% in this year's accounts for West Ham, which is obviously largely due to the fact that the club has, seen such a greatly reduced income this year. My question is this: how problematic is that for West Ham? And do you think that's likely just to be a one-off, and things will return to normal next year?
I think there's two elements to it. That is the wage cost. That's not the same as the wages paid. We're aware that some of the senior people at the club, and I believe some of the players as well, have taken a pay deferral. Now, that's not they will get their money. So from a cash flow point of view, I think the club will be fine. Is it sustainable on a longer term basis? No, it's not, because by the time you add in the cost of the transfer fees as well, and how they're accounted for, West Ham were paying £134 in total for wages and transfer fees for every £100 that was coming through the door. So clearly that's not a viable option on a long-term basis. I do expect, however, that figure to drop significantly next season because revenues will be up. Remember, and included in the wage bill was £3.5 million payoff to Manuel Pellegrini and his entourage that when he was dismissed. So clearly that cost isn't going to be incurred as well.
Okay, I did actually want to ask you about that, Mark. I'll ask you on this one. Eamon pointed it out yesterday on the forum that £3 million appeared to come from one of David Sullivan's unnamed companies, who it appears benefited with a 4.5% interest charge on that. Did you think that in itself was a little bit cheeky?
I thought it cheeky, and I think we've done to death. Kieran included the interest charge by the shareholders. I think it might be a reflection that Sullivan's other businesses are suffering. They are being certainly hit. His property portfolio is in office space in London and retail, and retail's not paying their rent as well. So yes, I don't know how long the loan was for. It was 3 million and at the usual rate of interest, but it was classified as a temporary loan. It did stick out in the accounts, though.
Yeah, it was a bed and breakfast deal, essentially. They loaned the money, I think, on December the 30th and repaid it by January the 7th.
Yeah.
So it was a very short-term stopgap loan. The worry for me in that, and Kieran, you touched on the word cash flow. I would find it alarming that an unexpected and unbudgeted cash cost, which would be the settlement of a manager's contract, for as little as £3 million or £3.5 million, would cause a football club to have to call in a special loan to make that payment. And that's what it very much looks like. And that sort of begs the question that whilst the losses declared by the club yesterday were bad in themselves, it's the cash flow that really matters, isn't it?
Yeah, cash is king in any business. I think what fans aren't necessarily familiar with is the way that the Premier League money pays money to clubs. So they don't get a monthly amount. They don't get it all up front. They get quite a bit in the summer and then installments. So I suspect that what West Ham were doing was that they were waiting for the next instalment of TV money to come from the Premier League, which was due in early January. They decided to get rid of Pellegrini at the end of December or whenever it was, and they could have waited a week or two, but they decided to they knew that the money was coming in the short term, and therefore they took the option of getting rid, using a bit of David Sullivan's own cash as a stopgap, in the knowledge that the monies due from the Premier League in terms of the way it distributes its funds were coming in. I agree with you entirely in terms of if I'm having to do that in my own finances, I'm getting a bit twitchy. But football is a unique and crazy industry. Normal business practices simply don't apply. Because of the erratic nature in the way that the industry operates.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Eamon, over to you again.
Okay, so where else can we go here? Yeah. Okay. Bit of praise for the club now, a little bit. Yeah, the pandemic, a lot of companies were doing layoffs, tapping furlough funds from the government, all that sort of thing, and then only paying their staff to a particular percentage. Our club has been very good, I think, to what I call its normal employees. It made sure that every employee received a proper salary, because not every employee of the club gets 80 grand a week. The vast majority are on probably 20, 25 grand a year salaries, whatever they may be. And they're not superstars. But in regards to the senior executives that took the deferrals, one of which was Karen Brady, of course, who is widely believed to be the highest paid named executive at the club for all her time there. How would her pay compare with the sort of the CEO of other football clubs? How would she compare in the pay league?
I would say she's mid-table. So you've got Ed Woodward and Daniel Levy, who are both on around about 3 million. You've got Steve Parish at Palace, who's not that far behind, about 2.6. Paul Barber at Brighton, he's on 2. Then you've got a few more in the. I think the guy in charge of Liverpool is about 1.3, 1.4. So not at the top of the table. There are some clubs that claim that they don't pay their executives at all. Burnley do that, and I find that a little bit strange. Manchester City claim not to pay any of their directors. Presumably they do it out of love rather than money. Although when you take a look at the Manchester City, the City Football Group, which sits above Manchester City, it's paying out 5 million. So it's all a little bit confusing. But I don't think that she is certainly not in the top 7 or 8 of football club executives in terms of remuneration.
Kieran, how many of those other CEOs are full-time as opposed to our part-time CEO?
As far as I'm aware, that they're all full-time. They certainly, in terms of accessibility and the way that they tend to be public in things, that does appear to be a full-time role. I don't know how many hours Karen Brady works at West Ham. Again, you're much closer to that issue than I am.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, one of the concerns I have here is because we see the number in the accounts. It's, oh my God, she gets how much and all the rest of it. I'd actually spin it on its head and say, would we be better off hiring a full-time, more commercially astute executive to really drive those corporate sponsorship deals, the shirt deals and so forth? Because it seems to me that the really big gap between ourselves and other clubs is in that area. We really lack in corporate sponsorship, and I can't really see us closing that gap. I mean, Mark touched on it earlier, where the gap was £16 million a decade or so ago. It's now hundreds of millions. And so the move to the Olympic Stadium, which is supposed to help us make the leap, has done anything but. And I just wonder if we need more, a higher caliber in our commercial arenas.
An example, and Kieran will certainly back this up, is the club potentially get a share of the stadium naming rights. Yeah, and a few years back, sort of Brady voiced concern that wasn't happening and offered to do a lot more to help. But one of the issues with the stadium naming rights is it typically goes along with shirt sponsorship. Yeah, but a limiting factor on the E20 and the LLDC agreement on the stadium is there's to be no alcohol or gambling companies involved in the naming rights. Yet here we are, we go and carry on and renew the sponsorship with Betway. So that again is ruling out any involvement of our shirt sponsor with the naming rights in the stadium. It's issues like that need to look at the far bigger picture of moving the commercial income forward.
I think in terms of the relationship with football clubs, of which I would say that are in West Ham's peer group. So I'm probably going to offend somebody here, but looking at the size of the club, who am I comparing West Ham to? It's going to be Everton. It's going to be Newcastle. It's going to probably be Leicester as well. Leicester are a really well-run club, and trying to get. I mean, I've spoken to some of the chief executives of those clubs, and I say, what is the score with the gambling sponsors? And one of them turned around to me and said they're not the only game in town, but they're the biggest paying game in town. So if West Ham are getting, let's say, £8 or £9 million from Betway a year, if they were to go and switch, then they're going to be struggling to get £5. So all of a sudden, you're £3 million down. Now you might be saying, well, that might help us in terms of getting the naming rights for the stadium from another partner. Is there that partner there? Because Spurs haven't managed to sell their naming rights yet, and they own the stadium. Chelsea haven't done it. Palace haven't done it. Fulham haven't done it. All of these other clubs in London. So I'm always a little bit cautious about the naming rights to a stadium, because it's not necessarily as valuable as people think it's going to be. I grew up with Bolton Stadium. To me, it's always will be the Reebok. But then it became the Macron, then it became the University of Bolton. And sponsors see that and they say, well, what exactly are we getting? Especially that West Ham themselves are tenants in that stadium. So how quiet that stadium is in terms of being a West Ham experience on non-match days. It's not like Spurs, where you can go in and you can do the crazy roof tour, which will cost, a mate of mine did that. He went there with him and his two kids, 250 quid by the time that they'd come out of the megastore at the end of it. And that was on a weekday. And West Ham don't have that. And they've not got, let's go to the such and such stadium. So I'm always a little bit cautious about naming rights. You have to have a really good relationship before it comes through. The Everton figures, which look too good to be true, I'll let you fill in the gaps there. They have a very close relationship with Alisher Usmanov, who happens to be the guy that bought out the Mashiri, who's the Everton owner. And now they're back and they're big bosom buddies. He's paid 35 million quid for an option to name the new stadium in 4 years' time. And that's before he starts. That's before you start sponsoring. That just looks absolutely incredible. That is the deal of the century. If it was done on normal commercial terms, has it been done on normal commercial terms? It's certainly a very generous investment. So I'd just be a little bit careful in terms of Karen Brady's role. Again, you're much closer than I am. As far as David Gold and David Sullivan are concerned, she is their eyes and ears on the ground of that club. Now, whether that's 3.5 days, 4 days a week, or 5 days a week, that's not, I don't know the details. And they trust her. And it comes down to that relationship of trust. They believe that she can deliver in what they are looking for. Could a more person from a more experienced football background? Karen Brady's been in football a long time. I don't, I see her on The Apprentice. I don't know, the intimate details of the deals that the club are involved with. That's the stuff which you guys are more familiar with than me.
Great stuff.
Yeah, I think in fairness, Kieran, to Karen Brady, the football deals, I believe, are done by David Sullivan. So whereas at other clubs, the chief executive might do the football deals based on the manager says I want player A, B, or C, and then the CEO, because of the financial structuring of some of the deals, you need somebody who is financially competent to actually do those negotiations. So effectively, David Sullivan is the football CEO. Karen Brady runs, essentially, without being rude, the day-to-day operation stuff in terms of, is the ticket office crude, that kind of thing. And that's why I think For the job she actually does, I suspect she's overpaid. For the job that we need to do, I suspect we've got the wrong person, and the role is underpaid. That would just be my view. But I think clearly is where we lag behind the other clubs, is we can't drive that commercial revenue, and part of which we touched on naming rights there. With the stadiums in public ownership, UEFA have got a great report on their website somewhere, but it gives the figures in terms of football clubs in the UEFA jurisdiction that are in publicly owned stadiums. There's something like 75% of them are without any kind of naming rights at all, and they're generally seen, if it's in public ownership, you're never going to get a naming rights deal. So if the idea of the move from the bowling ground to Stratford was to cash in on a load of naming rights opportunities, I'd suggest we were either exceptionally naive because they were never going to happen, or we just actually took the view we're not bothered about it for some of the reasons you've just identified there, which is saturated market, and do the people that pay for it perceive real value from it? And I suspect not.
Okay. I'm going to ask about, I want to move on to the summer. We all look forward to the summer as football fans. We all hope our teams are going to spend lots of money and bring in lots of exciting new players for the coming season. Now, Kieran, we spoke, again, going back to our conversation this time last year, we were looking at the finances, and I think you, to paraphrase, you said there was not a lot of wiggle room. Even though that fans want next level players, you didn't think that was realistic for West Ham last summer. I think you mentioned that the average wage increased from 49,000 to 63,000 pounds per player. You said there wasn't much opportunity to spend more. That's exactly how it transpired. Of course, West Ham barely, brought anyone in last summer. In fact, we were sort of subject to the likes of Grady Diangana being sold to West Bromwich Albion, and a couple of loan players. We all moaned when Craig Dawson was signed on loan right at the end of the transfer window from Watford. Who's laughing now?
But we all deny it, don't we? We're all saying, oh, what a signing. Yeah, we're delighted with Craig Dawson. At the time, it was a different description, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely. My question really is this, given, and I suppose that a lot of this is dependent on where West Ham finish, but what's your view on the situation as things stand in terms of how West Ham are going to approach this summer? Do you think there'll be players coming in, given what you've seen in the accounts this week? Of course, we don't know. West Ham could be, we pray, in the Champions League next year. How much of a difference would that make to the club? That's sort of a 2-point question really there.
The transfer market this summer is going to be very soft. And remember, the club already owe £111 million. So you're starting off with that as a minus figure in terms of your transfer budget in many regards. I don't know over how many years these instalments are due, but there's a lot of money that the club is committed to paying out in the summer of 2021 already. Those pay deferrals, those are going to be catching up in terms of cash flow. So if the club gets into the Champions League, then David Moyes, or assuming David Moyes is going to be the manager, will be knocking on David Sullivan's door and says, right, well, I know that that's a minimum of 40 million quid coming in for the club. How much of that comes to me? And so I think that will be one budget. There'll be another budget if the club is in the Europa League, and there'll be a third budget if the club isn't in the European places. If we take a look at the market, you've got to consider sales as well as purchases. And we use this phrase net spend, which I think is overplayed. I tend to focus more on the cash as an issue. West Ham have some very desirable players. If one or two of those goes, then clearly that allows the club to completely change the budget, because they've all of a sudden they've got an extra X million pounds in the bank, which can now be utilised. So it's going to be a tricky market. There'll be lots of opportunities to sign players from the likes of France, because the French TV deal has collapsed. French football is in a far bigger crisis than the position we see here in the UK, and it's also elsewhere on continental Europe. They don't have the benefit of TV deals as large as the Premier League, so there are opportunities to pick up players on bargain. So it's not necessarily how much money you spend, it's how much bang you get for your buck. Whereas you might have normally said, well, for £50 million, I get two half decent players. Next year, for £50 million, you'll be getting three, because simply that the prices in the market overall have fallen. I saw a report by KPMG, and it said that the overall spend last summer was around about 2/3 of the previous, and if you strip out the Premier League, the spend in Europe was less than half. So prices are coming down, and wages are coming down as well. In terms of demands, especially if you're recruiting from places like France, because players will go, for it to be guaranteed that they'll get a weekly or monthly wage.
Okay, and
I think we're going to have a bit more broadcasting revenue this year. We should finish higher than 15th. Each place is worth just under 3.2 million. So even finishing something like 7th is a £24 million improvement. Which falls straight to the bottom line, or well, not quite straight to the bottom line, because actually we then have to pay more rent to on the stadium, because there's actually some clauses in there that should we finish 10th, then we pay an extra £25,000 next year. Should we finish 7th, it's £200,000, and should we actually end up 4th, well, it's almost 500. It's almost £500,000 plus £250,000 extra for qualifying for the Champions League. So there's a £750,000. So if Mr. Sullivan begrudges spending 40,000 to travel up to Everton for a League Cup match, I hate to think what he'll begrudge us travelling around the wilds of Europe and having to pay more rent to the stadium owners.
Further,
look on the bright side is we will get more TV revenue, and certainly if we qualify for the Champions League, then that increases our ability to borrow even more money if need be, because we will get it back from the increased revenues from being in Europe, or specifically the Champions League. Europa not so much. So.
Is there a vast difference between the Champions League and the Europa League, and in terms of immediate revenue? And if so, roughly how much are we talking? I mean, because let's be honest, it's a bit of a pipe dream. We'd love to be in the Champions League next year. I mean, every supporter would, but it's still fairly unlikely. So what sort of figures are we looking at here, Kieran?
78% of UEFA's prize pot goes to the Champions League, and there's 32 clubs in that. The other 22% goes to the Europa League, and there's 40 clubs. So you've got more money split between fewer clubs. Mm-hmm. In the Champions League, you get €2.7 million for a win. You get 16 million just for being there. Then you get a slice of the money from BT. So yes, you can, if you get out of the group stage, realistically, I'd say you're looking at an extra 40 million quid. When Liverpool got to the final against Spurs in 2019, Liverpool made 109 million, Spurs made 100 million. And that was purely from prize money. So that's ignoring the fact that you've had 6-7 home matches en route. You've got your sponsors paying bonuses. So winning the Champions League is worth around about £150 million to a club. That's more than the revenue of half the clubs in the Premier League itself.
The £16 million you mentioned for being in the Champions League, that's presuming you get to the group stage. That's not going to be for teams in the qualification.
All English clubs get to the group stage.
Yeah.
Oh, of course they do now, don't they? Yes, of course. Yeah.
All 4 now. Yeah.
Okay.
And so compared with winning a domestic cup, let's say the FA Cup, which West Ham United, it's all we've ever won. Can we now see exactly why we see weakened teams in the FA Cup week after week, and frankly, teams being kept for the Premier League games? Because £2 million for every place up the table, Plus, then if you actually get into the money league in Europe, it's exponential, really, isn't it? And it's vast. Which just goes back to our January transfer window, Kieran, whereby we did no business at all in the positive sense. You know, we sold players. We were in a strong position in the league, and it's made many questions from supporters of, if we're not going to make the leap now and try to get into the Champions League, are we really on our uppers in terms of finances? Because, you know, we're at the stage of one more striker could have made the difference. And yet we didn't have the money or the desire to do it. And it seemed very strange to supporters.
Yes, supporters and managers will always want more money spent on more players. And then you've got the board of directors who are saying, how's that going to be funded? We know that the club has a facility now with MSD. I don't know enough about the personal circumstances of the owners. From what you're saying, if David Sullivan's other business interests are mainly focused in retail, yeah, there's nothing happening there. The rents are being deferred. That we know that the stores are going bust. So, is it a case of can't pay or won't pay? You know, that's really beyond my remit. I don't know enough about his personal circumstances. He might have said, you know, we've done really well. We have pushed the boat out, in the sense that, you know, West Ham's wages, you know, there's still a hangover from the Pellegrini, from the Haller days. And you've got to take that into consideration as well, that we've done actually remarkably well to be where we are today, having, by the looks of it, made some errors in terms of recruitment in the previous 2 or 3 seasons. And, you know, it's, you know, people thought it was, you know, a bit of a Pellegrini party. Well, after the party comes the hangover. I think West Ham on the pitch have coped with that hangover very well. And again, I'm an outsider here. David Moyes has done an amazing job.
Yeah, it just sort of brings me to the rights issue that was mentioned as a post-balance sheet event that the club had last year. Because it always strikes me that we haven't got quite enough money in the club ever, whether we were under different owners or the current owners or whatever it may be. But for us to have a rights issue last summer, which I think they kind of struggled a little bit to get it properly subscribed. And I think there was, you know, reading between the lines, was an element of arms twisting and that kind of thing. I just wonder that they raised £30 million. Had you been organising that rights issue, how much would you have been asking a club like West Ham United to actually say, this is the amount of money you need to raise to fund your club properly?
It depends how you define properly. What is West Ham's right position in the Premier League? You know, is it top 10? Is it top 8? Should it be gunning for top 6? Because those incremental movements up the table are very, very expensive. And as we've seen with recruiting the likes of Haller, they're not guaranteed either. In terms of that rights issue, you know, who made that request? Ultimately, it was David Sullivan saying to David Sullivan and David Gold, you know, how much money are we willing to put in? Because they were putting in, you know, the vast majority of the commitment in terms of the rights.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I think they need to put about another 250 million in that. So if I was answering the question to myself, I'd have said that's what I'd like them to put in. But really, what you're saying there is it's the risk reward element, isn't it? Because they would say, no matter if they put 200 million pounds in, well, it's their £2 million that goes if they buy half a dozen Sebastian Hallers, that kind of thing. And they seem to be, every deal that they look at generally is risk averse, whether it's the stadium catering, whereby they're happy to give away the cost element of it, say, we don't want the cost of serving hot dogs and we'll live without the revenue. And it just strikes that the message they're giving all the time is happy to stay in the Premier League, but no real desire to win it.
I mean, they will argue, and I can assure you I am not a spokesperson for David Gold or David Sullivan, even though I used to work for one of them running one of their retail establishments about 40 years ago.
Wasn't Ann Summers, was it, Kieran?
It was before Ann Summers. It was extremely dodgy.
But they do nothing in my size, so you know. That's why
You weren't an actor by perchance, were you?
No. If you take a look at the wage bill at West Ham, it has doubled over the course of the past 6 years. So they would say, we've invested in talent. West Ham's wages are now, 7th or 8th biggest in the Premier League, and they previously were perhaps 12th or 13th. So that's the argument that they will put forward, that they have put money in. If you sign a player for £30 million and he turns out to be a bit of a turkey, you're still left with him for 2 or 3 seasons, still paying out those wages of say 50 grand a week, and he's not in the squad, and he's not, and the fans very quickly forget about him.
Okay. Great stuff. We are going to have to wrap up fairly soon. There's a couple of questions I want to get through before we do that. Mark, I'll come to you first on this one. One of the things that West Ham fans sort of have kind of held on to now is that on the 22nd of March 2023, there's a change in terms of the payments that David Sullivan, David Gold, the owners, need to make if they are to sell the club. Now, you can clarify the figures here. I believe at the moment, any sale under 300 million, they're going to have to pay something like 19.4 million currently. Over 300 million, it's 20% on top of that. But after the 22nd of March 2023, that figure falls to around £7 million for any sale after that date. Now, as I said, a lot of fans are holding on to that date, thinking that's it. When that date comes, they're going to sell. That's, we'll see the back of them. Is that necessarily the case, do you think, or do you think it's a bit of a red herring, that one?
It's not a red herring because, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of difference. Either, say the club is, if the club sold for, 400, 500 million tomorrow, someone's got to find that 60 million. And it either gets added to the asking price, therefore the new owners, pay it, or the existing owners forgo that. That's a big chunk of money that would be very, very hard to, justify and forego. The 23rd of March, 2 years' time, it is a big decision time, and certainly, there's going to be no movement before then. But because of that financial constraint.
Okay, you don't think that's perhaps why some people believe they're overvaluing the club, which could potentially cover that difference?
That comes down to negotiation, and it's difficult. Yes, it could be potentially overvaluing. Will it drop by 60 million? I think conversely, you look at the fortunes that we're having this year, and that potentially increases the value. Well, it certainly increases the value of the club from our normal or last year's position of being in the relegation zone. Mm-hmm. I think so. It has an impact and things, but then it would depend upon new owners and how they value the club. The club's only worth what someone's prepared to pay for it.
Okay, great stuff.
I personally don't think that's an issue.
No.
If the club's losing 50 or 60 million pounds a year, then you've moved 2 years down. The West Ham could lose 50 million pounds until we get to 2023. No disrespect to the two guys. How old are they going to be in 2023? Why not go and sell? Somebody comes in with a good offer this summer. Those terms are not going to stop the sale.
Oh no, it won't stop the sale, but it's still 60 million, somewhere that someone's got to find that doesn't go on player acquisition.
Hopefully not the sale of a player like Declan Rice or something like that to make up a shortfall. Final question. We're gonna wrap up here, but where we wrapped up actually last year, Kieran. I don't know if you remember, but right at the end we asked who we felt were going to be going down this year. I've also got to ask you this: do you think Brighton are going to stay up this year? Your beloved Brighton and Hove Albion struggling. We were both struggling, weren't we, together last year? Where we seem to be a little bit more fortunate this season. But yeah, do you think Brighton are going to stay up? And name your three. Last year, I think you said Norwich, Villa, and one other, and you also said West Ham were going to be fine. So I guess 2 out of 3 isn't bad. What do you reckon this season?
I think we've got to say that Sheffield United and West Brom are dead. Yeah, they're gone, and now it's a fight between Brighton, Newcastle, and Fulham. I think we've got a fair chance of going down. We're the only club ever to have conceded a goal after the final whistle. That's happened when VAR gave a penalty to Manchester United. We're the only club to miss 2 penalties this season. We're the only club to have 25 shots and concede 2 goals to an opposition that had 2 shots. So I think we keep saying we can't keep on being so unlucky, but there's only 12 games left. So yeah, it's going to be a big scrap. We've got to play Newcastle, Sheffield United, and Southampton. If we don't win any of those 3, we're down.
Yeah, some big games coming. What's the view of the Seagull fans with regards to Graham Potter? Here, obviously, everyone loves David Moyes at the moment, but I've seen a sort of few rumbles when we do a thing called the opposition view on KUMB when we play another team. We always look at the forums, and there was quite a few rumblings of discontent there. Although, to be fair, whenever West Ham win a game, it seems that the opposition always want their manager sacked for some reason. But what's the general view?
The vast majority of fans really like the style of football that we're playing. We've got an identity now. We know that we're going to play out from the back. We are a very attractive team to watch. We can't put the ball in the back of the net. So some fans are blaming the manager, the coach for that. He's a thoroughly nice bloke. He's had a really tough year. Both his parents have died over the course of the last 12 months. He's still got on with his job. He's very restrained in his comments. He doesn't slag anybody off. I think we've gone forwards under Graham Potter in terms of the way we play football. That's not been turned into results. We need a finisher, and if we had a finisher, then we'd be extremely dull. We'd be Villa or a club like that, sort of 9th, 10th, 11th, but we've not. So the role of the manager is overplayed. When I look at the statistical analysis, when I do a university research, 80% of it comes down to your budget, 15% actually comes down to luck. It's hitting the inside of the post and rolling out, or it's coming off somebody's arse in the last minute. You cannot, and those things don't even themselves out over a season. They even themselves out over 5 seasons. That's the problem. And 5% comes down to the manager. I think he's a good guy. And I'm probably talking on behalf of 3/4 of the Brighton fan base. 1/4 have really turned against him.
If they were to go down this year, do you think the club would stick with him in the Championship?
I think so, yeah, because if you look to see what happened with Burnley under Sean Dyche, again, Burnley and Sean Dyche are synonymous with each other. Very much one is the mirror image of the other. I think the owner of the club, he wants us to play this progressive football, and he knows that the only way that we can punch above our weight is if we play a style of football which is not the same as Sam Allardyce, Tony Pulis, Mark Hughes, that type of football. So that's the owner's philosophy, and I'm hoping he does stick with him regardless.
Lovely stuff. Mark, who's your 3 for relegation this year?
Well, Sheffield United and West Brom. Fulham are looking good. I potentially think it's Newcastle. I think if Brighton appear safe, what a final last day is going to be for Sky with the Fulham Newcastle match. Yeah, and things that could well be the decider. For Kieran's sake, I hope so.
Thank you.
Very much. I mean, if there's one club that seems to have more strife with its owners than West Ham United, it's certainly Newcastle United. Eamon, who's your 3 for the drop this year?
I'm with Mark. I think certainly Sheffield United, and they really ought to occupy 2 relegation spots forever. Sheffield United, because they'll just think of someone to sue, take to court, and that sort of thing. But no, certainly Sheffield United, West Bromwich Albion, I think, you know, it is a real desperate roll of the dice bringing in Sam Allardyce there. It hasn't worked. In fairness to everyone at that club, I don't think they've spent a lot of money in the relative sense. But I think Newcastle United, they've got a dark cloud that sits above St James's Park, which they can't shift. It puts a tone over the whole affair, whereby when you need to avoid relegation, everyone absolutely pulling in the same direction. Newcastle United, they're all pulling in different directions, and I think that'll be their undoing. And if Newcastle United fans think they've got it bad now, just wait 12 months, because it'll be a whole lot worse. I think Brighton will be fine. I think everything Kieran said about the type of football they're trying to play down there on the South Coast, it's a world away from Championship style football. And I think they've done the right thing in hiring Potter. I think he's a good manager. They'll be fine. But Newcastle, I think they're doomed. And you know, nothing personal, but if we can avoid long away trips to the northeast, so no Newcastle, no Sunderland, no Middlesbrough, and if we can avoid Hartlepool in the cup, I'd be quite delighted actually, because it's a bloody long way. So
yeah, just at the time that I've upped and moved to Lincolnshire, all these games were a lot closer than they used to be. Of course, it would have been an even longer journey for those poor Brighton fans travelling out there. But there you go, Kieran. If we're anything to go by, looks like Brighton are going to be safe this year. So we wish you all the best anyway for the rest of the season. Just grateful that for once it's not West Ham United who are involved in that relegation scrap. It's been a pleasure, gentlemen, tonight. I do hope that it's helped shed some light on the accounts for those of you who aren't particularly financially well versed, and hope it's made it all a little bit easier to understand. It's been a most enlightening debate, as someone else once said many years ago. I'd like to thank Eamon and Mark and Kieran for their company tonight. Maybe we'll be back again next year talking about West Ham in the Champions League. You never know. You never know. Maybe one day. That's it for tonight. We'll see you all again very soon. Come on, you Irons.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get on the forum at kumb.com. Come on, you irons.